first, I just want to ask you guys, I can't really see you, but try to think in yourselves, what school do you want to go to? All of you guys are here for a purpose, I'm assuming. If you are dedicated enough to be here, you probably are driven students and you have a school that you want to go to, or maybe your goal is to just get into college. Whatever it is, try to focus on that now and let that be the driving force throughout this presentation. Because the more you connect to the school that you want to go to and the more you feel that passion, the more it comes off in your writing and that authenticity and that character starts shining through. So some of you guys may have never seen college app questions before. There are different questions depending on what state you're in. Specifically for me, I applied to all schools in California through the University of California system. That includes UCLA, UC Berkeley, UCSB, all of the ones that have UC in the name have the same set of questions. There's also Common App questions, which is used for private universities, and almost any private university you apply to, Harvard, Stanford, whatever, Ivy League, or just a normal other private university, typically asks for Common App questions. So I'm going to quickly be showing you guys both. Most college admission questions are very similar. So today we'll primarily be focusing on UCs, but as you'll see when I show you the Common App questions, it's very similar. So as long as you get the general idea down, then you should be good. So I'm going to give you a brief minute or two just to read through some of these in case you've never seen them before. So those are the first four. Here are four more. All right, so out of those 8 questions for the UC application, they allow you to choose 4. You could choose any 4 questions. It doesn't matter which 4 you choose. It's not like one is weighted higher than the other. Whatever 4 resonate with you. For the Common App questions, it's kind of a similar system, except instead of giving you 8 prompts and you choose 4 essays to respond to, they give you 7 prompts and you just choose 1 question you want to respond to, but it's a much longer essay. So I'm not going to sit here and read through all the questions because there's kind of a lot, but if you read through just a few of them, you'll see that there's a very general theme in college app questions. This theme includes talking about your identity, talking about leadership, talking about challenges and how you overcame them. No matter what college you apply to, you'll notice this theme in the questions that they ask you. So start thinking about this as we go through the presentation so you can see how it applies to your life. All right, so I broke this presentation. This is me when I got into UCLA. For me, it was my top school, so it was a really exciting day for me when I met Joe Bruin for the first time, which is our mascot. And I broke this presentation down into a few segments just to make it condensed and easy for you guys to understand. The first part of it is I'm going to be showing you 4 steps to writing your first draft. So if you don't know where to start, if you're facing writer's block, what are 4 steps that you can break down and easily follow to get your first draft done? After that, I'm going to show you 10 tips that you can use to improve your first draft. So now you have this first draft, but you want to make it really good for final submission. So what are some things you can do and look out for in order to improve that draft? And then finally, in the last portion of my presentation, I think the best way to learn is through example. So I'll be showing you guys my own examples of the UC applications that I wrote, which got me into UCLA. So hopefully once you guys see those on top of the tips and the steps, you'll kind of see how I use that in my own writing process, and it'll help you see how you can use it in yours. So step number 1, this seems pretty intuitive. You probably hear it a lot, is to brainstorm, 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 but I can't emphasize this enough for college admissions. In your brainstorming phase, you literally want to just think about anything you've been involved in. It could be clubs, it could be internships, community service events, sports, research opportunities, anything you've been involved in, just write it on a piece of paper. Something to keep in mind when you're brainstorming is that all experiences matter and all experiences can be written in a really good way, depending on how you write them. So even if it's something that you don't think is like that impressive or you don't think really stands out, write it down in your brainstorming phase, because soon I'll show you there are ways to make even the smallest things stand out in a college admission essay. So write all of your experiences on a piece of paper. Okay, now you have this paper, you have a list of all your experiences. What do you do with that and how do you begin narrowing it down? What I like to do, and this helps you in structuring your college essays, is write down your role or your impact and what you learned next to every bullet point that you make. So your role is particularly the role that you played in that event or the impact that you personally made in that event. And what you learned is some sort of lesson, some sort of reflection. What did you get off of that event? After you have that, you should pick one word, just one word that would be the focus of your essay if you were to write about that experience. These words can be teamwork, unity, synergy, responsibility, proactiveness. So if I pick the word teamwork, let's say, then if I choose to write about that experience, I want the readers to know that I value teamwork, and that should be the main focus of my essay if I talk about that. The reason being is because you want every essay to highlight a different trait about yourself. So if you have one essay that talks about teamwork, leadership, responsibility, all of this stuff jumbled into one essay, it becomes lost, and there's not really this connection to yourself and to the reader that you want to be conveying. But if you choose one theme, one focus, then every single essay you write will show a different personality trait about you, and then you're going to show this holistic sense that people like in college admissions. So if you're doing the UC application, which asks for 4 different prompts, then you would just cross off all the experiences until you find 4 different character traits that you think describe you best. And since you wrote down 1 character trait per experience, you have 4 different experiences that you can now write about. If you're writing about the Common App, then you would just pick 1 because the Common App only requires 1 essay, but it's 500 words instead of 350. So that's a lot to take in. Let me give you a quick example. And this came from my own brainstorming process when I was going through my college essays. So when I went through brainstorming, I quickly wrote down some of the things I was involved in high school, which was president of Interact Club, founder of Walk with Earth Club, model United Nations diplomat. You don't need to do anything too much, just a really quick what you learned and what role you played. So the role I played was tripled membership and created service event. The lesson I learned was the power of unity. So my key word is unity. What does this mean? If I choose to write an essay about how I was the president of Interact Club, I want the main focus, the main theme of this essay to be unity. When the reader reads this essay, I want their takeaway to be, oh, this person values unity, and this is how. Okay, founder of Walk with Earth Club. The role I played, implemented first compost bin in our school. Learned lesson that you must be the change you wish to see. So now if I write about this essay as well, I don't want the theme to be unity again, because I already showcased that in another essay, and you want to show as much of your character as possible. So I try to think, what would the keyword be in this case? I chose initiative. That means I would structure my essay in a way such that I focus on the fact that I took initiative to implement this compost bin, not so much about the unity of us coming together as a school. That wouldn't be the focus in this case. The highlight is you taking initiative. Because then after the readers read the essay, they'll see, oh, okay, this person takes initiative. And this person values unity. It's 2 distinct character traits from 2 separate essays, which showcases more of your character. As my last example, model United Nations diplomat, role, work to reach a compromise, lesson, communicate effectively, and then the key word is negotiation. So in this case, I would highly focus on interactions I had where I had to negotiate with students. So the theme, the main takeaway for the readers is that I'm a good negotiator. This I cannot stress enough to you guys, especially if you are doing a college application that has multiple essays, like the UC essays. I believe the Coalition app also has multiple essays. Every essay should highlight a different key trait. That's why I think this step is so vital in your essay brainstorming process, is writing a different keyword for every experience, because you really want every experience to highlight something different. If you have 2 experiences that are about different events, but they both emphasize leadership, then sure, you've showed your leadership in 2 different ways, but you haven't showed anything else. There's nothing new you brought to the table. But if you have 2 events where you were a leader, let's say you were ASB president and you were the leader of like a research thing that you were doing, if you focus on a different thing in both of those essays, maybe one of them you focus on teamwork and one of them you focus on being proactive, then you were a leader, but in 2 different capacities, and it shows much more about your character. So every essay should highlight a different key trait. All right, step 2. Step 2 is to make an outline. This is really important because the last thing you want to do is start a college essay with not knowing where you're going to go. If you have your thoughts outlined, then your essay will go much smoother, and you're going to know what key points you want to hit. A college essay is strategic. You only have a limited amount of space. For UC apps, you have 350 words per question, which is not a lot at all. And for a Common App, you have I think like 550 words or something, which also isn't that much. So every word needs to count. And in order to ensure that every word does count, you should make an outline. What does this look like? The first part of your outline that you want to include is a hook. I know in English class or in any class you guys have taken, you've learned about hooks before, and you probably think of it as something like a funny statement that hooks you in, or like a fact or a quote or something like that. For college apps, hooks are much more subtle than that. It's still supposed to hook the reader in, but the main thing about a hook is that you want it to grasp the reader's attention by showcasing something of your character. For example, let's say you're writing an essay about leadership. If you open your essay with, "I've always loved being a leader," that's very bland, and that sounds like probably what 100 other people are writing. But if you open your essay with an anecdote, a really short story about one time when you were little where you worked with your parents on something and you started noticing this leadership trait in you and how it's evolved over time. If you open it with something fascinating like that, then boom, right away, readers are hooked in. If you open it with an interesting fact about your life, open it with some subtle joke, anything like that where the reader sees, okay, this is going to be an interesting essay, then that's a good idea. I'll show you guys examples of some hooks later when I read some essays to you, but just keep that in mind for now. The body of your essay is, in your outline, it doesn't have to be anything too snazzy. I would just recommend doing bullet points of what you want to include in your essay. So the body is the substance. The body has to directly answer the prompt. So make sure in your body you include either a chronological sequence of events that are taking place or the specific points you want to hit in your essay so you don't miss any when you start your first phase of writing. The last thing is the most important, and this is a reflection or a forward-looking statement. You can choose one or the other. So what is a reflection? Basically, at the end of your college essay, the reader doesn't want to see that you just have done things in the past, and that is it, that's over. They want to see that you can take your experiences from the past and turn it into something for the future. For example, let's say you are an ASB committee member, and you had this really awesome life-changing experience where you were a leader in some sort of form. If you just talk about your event as a leader, and then you end the essay there, the reader is like, okay, great, they did this leadership act, that's amazing, but what? What are they going to do with it? What does it mean for the future? What can they bring when they come to my school? By adding a reflection or a forward-looking statement, you are showing that you have taken that event, grown from it, and it is now part of your character in some fundamental way. So a reflection means you're talking about your lesson learned. Lesson learned is a reflection. And a forward-looking statement is, this is what I did, this is what I plan on doing with it in the future. You don't have to choose both, just choose one or the other, and that's enough for the end of your essay. And later I'll show you guys examples of both, so you'll be able to see. So here's an example of what an outline looked like for me. This is a really simple outline, and I just want to show you, it doesn't have to be fancy or anything like that, just a really quick breakdown of events so you know what you're doing when you're writing your paper. So this was one of the essays, President of an Iraq Club, where my keyword is unity. So keep in mind my keyword is unity. That means as I go through this outline, I really want to highlight this trait of unity. Hook. I want to talk about an anecdote about how service brings us together. Instead of just opening up with the event itself, let me start off with a little story, because stories are, I think, one of the best ways to hook readers in college apps, because it makes it much more personal. Body. The story of how I created a service event where everyone played a part in order to increase club involvement and enthusiasm. So this is the general summary of what I want to talk about in this essay. Okay, I know what I want to talk about. How am I going to talk about it? Well, first, I noticed fragmentation in the club. It was a bit disoriented. Not a lot of people were involved. Then I became president. Then what did I do as president? I created committees with a specific role for everyone. And then we worked together to make a service event happen. Very general, I didn't add any specific details, but I just provided a very small flow of ideas, so when I'm writing my paper, I know what I want to follow. Reflection. Instead of forward-looking statement, I chose reflection, which means I'm going to talk about some lesson. So what I'm going to talk about is the lesson I learned about synergy and how this redefined my view of leadership. Why do I bring a reflection into this? As I said earlier, if I just talked about this event without any sort of reflection or forward-looking statement, then it's stagnant in time. It's just trapped in one period of time and it's not part of me anymore. But if I clearly make that connection for the readers, I can show, oh, this is something that impacted me and it's something that I learned from. And now I can carry that forward into college so I can, play a good part in your school. All right, step 3 is to write a rough draft. So I'm going to tell you guys a little bit of a secret. There are two different essays that you can write. And this isn't like cut in stone. Obviously, there's a lot of different essays you can write, but there's two general categories of essays that you should try to follow. One is to pick one story that relates to your key theme and dig really deep into that story during your essay. So that means you're not going to talk about all of your leadership experiences bundled into one essay. You're going to pick one exact event of when you really stood out as a leader and create a story. Walk us through that story. Tell us the anecdote from the start to the end. Tell us what you learned. Tell us what you did. Tell us the role you did. All of the key details, you're going to really dig deep into them for that one story. Or the second type of essay you can do is to write about a few key experiences that showcase your growth within a theme. For example, if your theme is negotiation, you can talk about like 2 to 3 different events that you've taken part in where you had to negotiate and how you've grown in between those events. Based on the prompt of the essay, you would pick different models of writing, which we'll practice in just a second. When you're writing your rough draft, make sure to keep the word limit in mind. As I said, it's 350 words for UC essays and it's 500 something for Common App. Just because cutting down words is really hard, especially when you're attached to your essay and when you like what you wrote about. So I would always recommend try to stay under the word limit and then add on, because adding on is much easier than cutting down. Step 4 is to edit, revise, and repeat. This is one of the most crucial steps, and that's why I honestly applaud all of you for being here, because the fact that you're here shows that you are invested in starting early. If you are currently a third year in high school, oh my gosh, I have all my times mixed up. If you're a third year in high school, this summer is when you should start writing your rough drafts. Junior year summer is when you should start writing your rough drafts, so that when you get into your senior year, the fall of your senior year, you have all of your rough drafts done, and then you can just focus on editing, revising, and repeating. The way you edit and revise is send it to your friends, send it to your teachers, ask your parents to help you, read it aloud to people, see what they think. Stay authentic to yourself, but you really want to get a lot of eyes on your essay to see what they are learning about you from reading your essay, and is it being authentic to who you are. So when I did my essays, I finished all of my drafts in my junior year summer, and then when I got to senior year, it really alleviated the stress for me. Everybody, or like the majority of people, were starting to write their essays fall of senior year, and juggling that with school is just honestly so stressful. Just avoid it, start in summer, and you'll be so much happier. All right, 10 tips to success. Tip number 1. Make sure to understand what the prompt is asking and respond directly to the prompt. What do I mean by this? If the prompt is asking you about a leadership experience and you talk about something but don't directly reflect on how you stood out as a leader in that moment, then there's something wrong. You have to be able to read your essay and pinpoint exactly why this essay responds to the prompt. I can't tell you how many times I've reviewed students' essays, and it was a phenomenal essay. They did an amazing job highlighting some certain event, but there was no correlation between that and the prompt being asked. So you really want to make sure, key into what the prompt is saying, and adapt your essay to that prompt. Make it fit the prompt. Okay, this is a concept I was talking about earlier, one story or a few key experiences. So I'm going to show you one of the UC prompts. And I want you guys to, maybe in the Q&A chat, tell me if you think we should write one story for it, where we dig deep into one story, or talk about a few key experiences and show our growth in those key experiences over time. So this is UC prompt number 1. It says, describe an example of your leadership experience in which you have positively influenced others, helped resolve disputes, or contributed to group efforts over time. So go ahead and just write down what you think in the chat, one story or a few key experiences. Okay, awesome. I'm seeing somebody, oh, nice. Okay, so we have a bit of back and forth. So let's go ahead and break this down. I wish I could call on you guys, but I don't think you can talk, right? Okay, yeah, okay, so I'll just talk through it. So I want you guys to notice this keyword. Describe an example of your leadership experience. It's asking you to describe an example of your leadership experience that's positively influenced you or others, and then show how you've contributed to group efforts over time. So since it's asking you to describe an example, you want to pick one leadership experience, one specific experience where you shine as a leader, and then talk deeply into what your role was, what you learned, how it impacted others, how it impacted you. So this would be an example of one story. You might get tripped up over this word over time, but I want you to keep in mind that it did say describe an example of your leadership experience and then show how that leadership experience contributed to group efforts. So this is just part of the digging deep into that story. Let's see an example of a few key experiences. This one right here. You see prompt number 3. What would you say is your greatest talent or skill? How have you developed and demonstrated that talent over time? So now I want you to keep in mind, again, it says over time, but it's written in a different context. It's asking you to identify your greatest talent or skill, and then show how you have developed that talent over time. So if you just chose one key event where you were exhibiting this talent, let's say you're a really good mathematician, and you were just talking about one specific story where you really excelled. Is that showing this talent over time? Is that showing this growth or continuity? No, it's not. But if you pick a few key experiences, maybe you did a math league something when you were in 9th grade, and then you joined some sort of math club when you were in 10th grade, and then you did a math competition when you were in 12th grade and started helping your teacher with math tutoring, things like that. And you talk about all of those events and show how you grew over time, then you're directly answering the prompt because it's asking you, what is your greatest talent? How did you develop it over time? So this is an example of one story, and this is a few key experiences. All right, tip number 2. This one, I think out of anything you guys take away from today, it would be this. I want you to really focus on this because it's so important. So I'm going to say it and then I'm going to explain. You can make any experience fit any prompt if you write about that experience with the prompt's focus in mind. What do I mean by this? What I mean is I don't want you to look at the prompts and start trying to find experiences to fit those prompts. What you should be doing is looking at your experiences, looking at the keywords, the traits you highlighted in those experiences, and then seeing how you can make those experiences fit the prompts. I promise you, any experience can fit any prompt. All you have to do is slightly tweak the experience or write about it in a slightly different way, like choosing a different keyword to talk about, and then it will fit that prompt. So the best way to show this is with examples. Let's say I want to write about how I organize a new event as a member of ASB. So if you guys can just write in the chat, what are some themes I can choose to write about? If I want to talk about my role as an ASB member, what are some themes that I can write about in my essay? Leadership, awesome, Andrew, good. Anything else? Collaboration, beautiful, yeah. Let's do one more. Organize a new event. What are you doing if you're organizing a new event? Initiative, awesome. You can talk about leadership, collaboration, initiative, teamwork, unity, proactiveness, so many different keywords for this one thing. Now let's see how these different keywords can fit the prompts. So if you talk about leadership, your focus would be what you did as a leader to carry the event forward. You're not so much focusing on the teamwork aspect of it, not so much focusing on the initiative. Sure, those are all components of a story, but the main takeaway is your leadership, what you did specifically as a leader and what that leadership means to you. If you talk about teamwork, then your main focus in the essay would be how you facilitated group work among ASB. So it's less about your specific role in yourself, like what you did as that leader. It's more about how you facilitated this teamwork and how this teamwork changed your perspective of things. What teamwork means to you? Why does teamwork make you work better, or why does it not? If you talk about initiative, then your main focus is how you were proactive and followed through with your goal. Maybe in this case, you would talk about how ASB never had this event before, and you were the one who really wanted to take that initiative and push it forward. Perseverance. In this case, you would want to talk about the challenges. Focus on an event where you experienced some challenges, and you were the one who really persevered and pushed that event forward. As you can see, all these different themes cause you to write about the essay in a slightly different way. Keep in mind that every component is still there. If you talk about leadership, there will still be components of teamwork, initiative, perseverance, all of that, but the focus is the keyword that you have chosen for that essay. So now how we can make the keywords fit the different prompts? Well, let's see. Question 1 of the UC app, and I believe question 3 or something of the Common app, asks you about a leadership experience. So if you want to write about this event and you want to answer leadership experience, all you have to do is make your theme about leadership. You can answer the prompt about the creative side. There's a prompt that asks, please describe your creative side. If you want to write about your creative side, you can talk about how solving conflict, that's a part of your creativity, or how you created this really cool event and you designed all of the posters and stuff, that's part of your creative side. You would just focus on that aspect and answer this prompt instead. You can answer the prompt about your greatest skill. There's a prompt that says, what is your greatest skill? Please show how you've demonstrated that over time. You can pick any of the themes and say, leadership is my greatest skill. You can say, teamwork is my greatest skill. You could say, taking initiative is my greatest skill. You could pick any of the themes and write about greatest skill as your prompt. Making school a better place. There's a question that asks, what have you done to make your school a better place? You can focus on a different theme and then answer this prompt. So as you can see, all of these prompts you pick the experience and then you pick how the experience fits the prompt based on how you shape that experience. Not that you pick the prompt and then pick an experience to fit the prompt. The main reason I emphasize this so much is because when you look at prompts, you often have a very closed mindset. Like if you look at a leadership prompt, you'll probably just think of things where you had some sort of title, like you were president or you were committee member, things like that. But if you look at your experiences first and then see how the prompts fit the experiences, you'll be much more open-minded with where you can take these prompts. Leadership, for example, does not have to be a title. It can literally be being a big sister or being a big brother or taking care of your family in some sort of way, or it can be anything. And you don't want to lead it with that closed mindset. So that's why you want to look at your experiences and see how they can fit the prompts instead of the other way around. All right, tip number 3. This one is also really important. And I do have to say, I've seen this so many times in essays of focusing on the negative. So there are a lot of college essay prompts that ask you, what is a significant challenge you faced? Or what is some hardship you've experienced in your life? And a lot of you have stories to tell, and that's amazing. And you really should be vulnerable and tell those stories in your college apps. However, when you're telling those stories, the focus of the essay is not the hardship you experience. It's not the challenge you face. The focus of the essay is how you grew from that challenge and what you learned from it. How you are a better person or a different person, more mature person, whatever it is, how that challenge or hardship impacted that. So if you write about some sort of challenge, I would say the rule of thumb is to spend at most 1 paragraph talking about that challenge. The rest of the essay should be tied in some sort of way to what you did because of that challenge, how you grew from it, what you learned from it. Your essay should be mostly positive, because even though you might see it as being vulnerable if you spend your whole essay writing about your hardship, you get to the end of the essay and you're like, okay, but what happened because of it? Like, what are you now because of it? That's what you want to focus on. Okay. Tip number 4, I know there's a lot of stress around writing essays, and a lot of you might feel as in you need to fall into some sort of loophole of writing about what you think the readers want you to write about. You think the readers want you to write about like being a leader of 1,000 different clubs and like finding cures to cancer. Like that's not it. You guys don't have to be doing all this crazy stuff to get into a great school. All you have to do is think about what makes you unique and write about it in a way that showcases that. It really is about the way you write things and less about what you write. Now, granted, this does not mean that you should exaggerate or that you should lie. You should never do that in college apps because that comes through. What you should do, though, is really focus on the experiences in your life that truly made an impact on you, like that you can really resonate with, and then write about it in a way that shows that impact. The more passionate you are in your writing, the more it'll come off to the readers and the more powerful your story will be. So in your reflections, talk about what you learned from the experience. Try to avoid cliche lessons that you've heard from others, just because college readers read so many essays and they've probably heard all of the cliches before. So try to keep it original with the lessons that you learned. Tip number 5, write your essays about something that the reader cannot find elsewhere in your application. What do I mean by this? So the application has many different components. Essays are only one component of your application. There's also a section where you can list all the extracurriculars you've taken part in, all of the jobs you've had, all of the special classes you've taken. There's like 5 different categories of things you can input with just a quick bulleted line describing that. It's not a full essay. So if you have many experiences, try to keep your essays about a topic that's different from what you write about in your small category, so you're not repeating yourself. However, if you feel like there's an experience that you do not have enough time to write about in that small bulleted sentence they give you, and you want to really dig deep into it in your essay, then that's a good opportunity to do so. For example, say I write ASB president as one of my leadership roles in my category, but I really had this specific life-changing event as an ASB leader that I really want to emphasize in one of my essays. Then you can go ahead and repeat it. But I would try to write your essays about something the readers can't find elsewhere, just so you can offer as much about yourself as possible. All right, tip number 6 is avoid any sentences that don't add meaning to your essay, because every word counts, especially on such a limited word count like 350 words. You're going to realize you have to tell a story, and telling a story in 350 words is very limiting. So adding any fluff or any extra words that don't add meaning, take them away. For example, I've used this already, but I've always loved being a leader. This tells the reader absolutely nothing about you. It doesn't say how you loved it, why you loved it, how you are a leader, nothing. Scratch that sentence. What can you replace it with? What about an anecdote? What about a story? What about a quote? What about a specific event? Things that add meaning and really show your character other than just stating. Very cliche, but show instead of telling. It's a powerful thing we learned in 3rd grade. Okay, tip number 7, this one is just kind of a general thing. You don't have to do this, but a really, really good hook to use is an anecdote. I'll show you once I read my essays to you, I'll show you some different hooks you can use. But an anecdote is a great way to immediately captivate the reader into the story. And when you have an anecdote, you kind of set the premise for your essay. If you open with some sort of story, then you are already building this story format, and it makes the essay much more personal. And what the readers look for the most is personality. So if you open with a personal story, you're already hitting that off the go. Tip number 8 is, I think, a really powerful tip to use. It's to end your essay with something that ties it back to the hook. You really want your reader, when they're done reading your essay, to feel as if you stood out in some way, to remember you in some way. And one of the best ways to do that is to tie the end of your essay back to the beginning, to show kind of a cohesive full circle to your growth. For example, let's say that you are a computer scientist, and you open your essay with an anecdote about how you loved working with your mom or with your dad when you were younger on building some sort of robots. I don't know. I'm not really a computer scientist, I can't say. Let's just say you were building robots with your mom when you were younger. Then maybe as you talk about your growth through your love for computer science throughout the essay, end your essay with something like, looking back on when I used to build robots with my mom, blah, 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 blah. Because this ties it back for the reader instead of making them have to do that. And that makes for a really powerful story. All right, tip number 9, this is part of a revise, edit, and repeat phase. Edit, revise, and repeat phase. It's to read your essay aloud to another person. What I did when I finished my drafts is, instead of having my parents read them on the computer, I actually read it aloud to them. The reason being is because if your essay is structured well, and if it's written from your authentic voice, then you should be able to read it aloud to somebody, and they can follow along the structure, and they can follow along and feel as if that is truly your voice and you are being authentic in your essay. Especially people like your parents, your close friends, they know you, and when you read it aloud to them, they'll be able to see, is this you, or is there too much fluff here? Did you add something just to make it sound good rather than being true to yourself? Tip number 10 is, you guys are already stars at this just by being here. Give yourself time. Your essays, honestly, they will go through so many revisions. I think my first draft changed like 35 times until I submitted my final copy. So just be aware, give yourself time. Essay writing is not stressful. A lot of people say it is, but typically the reason it is because people don't give themselves time. If you start in summer and you have so much time, it becomes a really beautiful process of reflection where you get to learn about things that really matter to you, and you get to learn about how awesome you are, because you guys all are awesome. You just need to take that time to reflect and give yourself the time to write good about it. Okay, so now we're going to move into the next segment of this presentation, which is examples. So as I go through these examples, I just want you guys to think about some of the tips I've explained, some of the steps I've explained, and see if you can see how some of those tips came off in some of these essays. Because later I'll be asking you a bit about that, and then we can analyze it a bit and see how we can use these tips. So this is the first PIQ of the UC app. It's very similar to one of the questions on the Common App. It says, describe an example of your leadership experience in which you have positively influenced others, helped resolve disputes, or contributed to group efforts over time. The radiant eyes of a hospitalized child hearing live piano music. The genuine smile of an exhausted family receiving a homemade meal. And the mutual gratitude that pulses between us all as we bind together to share life's greatest gift, service. Looking around, I feel our dynamic change. No longer a fragmented club, our impact finally spans beyond our individual reach. When I first joined Rotary's Interact Club, a club devoted to altruism and leadership development, I noticed an unsettling disconnect. In a vain struggle for signed hours, our service events were devoid of enthusiasm and passionate members. Sensing the threat of disintegration, I decided to take initiative and revitalize the meaning of charity. So I secured presidency to make my vision for a cohesive club a reality. It is our first meeting. I arrange our chairs in a circle so we are open to each other and the possibilities of this new year. Instead of strictly pulling out the minutes sheet and creating a professional barrier between the leader and members, I smile and say, let's start with a name game. As we unravel our personalities, I discover that every person has a unique strength, a key ingredient, vital in completing the recipe for our next Ronald McDonald Soup Kitchen event. Therefore, I introduced committees that fit specific interests so we could all find our own zesty niche. With Michael's communication skills, he emails the facility. With Audrey's marketing talents, she takes charge of fundraising. Daria fulfills her musical gift by playing piano as we serve food. After weeks of collaboration, a sense of triumph buzzes among us. With every member now playing a vital part, we're all equally eager to see our group efforts unfold. Like a puzzle, we each contributed our individual piece in order to complete the greater picture. Looking around as smiles spread endlessly, I'm overcome by a revelation. A true leader guides everyone in maximizing their unique potentials. By connecting with each other, we all feel inspired to unlock our gifts and make something bigger than ourselves. Together, that's how we create meaning. Okay, so this kind of is a bit of a giveaway because I talked about this essay a lot throughout the outline, but here are some questions that I want you guys to think about. What was the theme of this essay, and did I write about one story or a few key experiences? Can we get some answers in the chat? What was the theme of the essay? Did I write about one story or a few key experiences? Did I choose a reflection or a forward-looking statement? All things to consider when writing your essays. One story, thank you. Yeah, awesome. So Sohan, sorry if I'm pronouncing that wrong, said one story. Ami, thank you, one story. Awesome, yeah. So the reason I talked about one story is because the prompt specifically asked describe an example of a leadership experience. So I chose one example where where we had a service event, Ronald McDonald, and talked about how exactly we made that event come alive. Did I have a reflection or a forward-looking statement? Remember that a forward-looking statement talks about what you did with that event and what you plan on doing in the future, and a reflection talks about what you learned and how it changed your perspective in some sort of way. Reflection, awesome, yeah. So over here, when I say, like a puzzle, we contributed our individual piece, looking around, I'm overcome by a revelation. Here, revelation is the key word. I'm saying, I learned something from this event. It changed what leadership means to me. Now I know what a true leader is, and now I've learned what I want to be as a true leader in the future. Beautiful. My role, if you remember from my outline, I had very specific bullet points. I just said, notice fragmentation, became president, started committees so everyone could kind of let their talent shine, and then made the service happen. And through the essay, I kind of went with that flow. I said I became president. I said everyone had this specific role. And then at the end, I said it was a success. Then I had my reflection. So hopefully you can see kind of how the outline ties into the finished product. Beautiful. Okay, let's move into the next example. This one says, what would you say is your greatest talent or skill? How have you developed and demonstrated that talent over time? So if you guys remember from when we were talking about it previously, we mentioned how overtime is kind of a key word because it's asking you to describe one skill and talk about it through time. So already you kind of can key into the fact that I'm probably going to be writing about a few key experiences instead of one story. So with that in mind, try to focus on how this essay is a bit different from the last in that sense. My dad used to tell me I talked too much. I suppose he was right. At the time, I did not value words and the impact they can make. However, when I delivered my 8th grade promotion speech and my words of encouragement ran like a current through us all, I felt something change. I could see it in the eyes of my peers, the inclined posture of their families. They were inspired. Just like that, my words became more than a target of my dad's jokes. They became my catalyst for change. After uncovering the influential role communication has in life, I explored venues to further develop this skill. First, I took advantage of the Rotary Speech Contest, an opportunity to build my public speaking skills by competing with students from other districts. Much more than a first place title, I yearned to use this as a platform for the words I now knew could make a difference. So I designed my speech around a pressing issue, the need for greater funds to school buses. After my speech, an audience member approached me with surprising news. He was from the Board of Education, and he felt inspired to work together in taking action. With a sudden dawning for communication's role in building networks, I continued to participate in the speech contest every year. Still, I felt the urge to explore a different angle of communication, negotiation. So I took the role of a Japanese ambassador in the Model United Nations Conference, where I worked with other international ambassadors to solve the crisis of China's artificial islands. With a wide diversity of approaches and ideas, we initially encountered conflicts in reaching a common solution. However, keeping an open mind, I valued everybody's insight and listened closely before I spoke. Through this, I found that multiple perspectives were a gift, as we could consolidate novel aspects of each idea to reach a greater consensus. Looking ahead at the interactive opportunities UC campuses have to offer, I can't help but smile. With one talent comes infinite avenues of exploration. All right, you guys, I'm going to ask you the same questions. So we already covered this was a few key experiences instead of one story. Now I want you to think about what the theme was in this essay. What was the one word, one message, one focus that stood out to you? Did I end with a reflection, or did I end with a forward-looking statement? And if you have any ideas of some tips I utilized, feel free to write those in the chat as well. Good. Communication is what Anishka says. Yeah, so communication was the theme of this essay. And I try to make that clear. Oops, my bad. I try to make that clear throughout the essay by saying, after uncovering the influential role communication has in life, a different angle of communication, dawning for communication, showing that communication is the theme, communication is the talent, and I'm showing I grow through that talent. Notice also over here how I respond directly to the prompt when I say, after uncovering the role communication has in life, I explored venues to develop this skill. It's important for me to note that communication is the skill, because if I didn't include the sentence, it might be a little vague, like, okay, you're talking about Model UN, you're talking about speech contests, like what skill are you trying to highlight? But when you start off your thesis statement with communication is my skill, it sets up the essay, shows you're responding to the prompt, and boom, you're set to go. Good, and then Ami says that I ended with a forward-looking statement. And Sohan says I ended with reflection. So those are both great ideas, and I can see where you're both coming from. I'm imagining Sohan might think I ended with a reflection because I say, through this, I found that multiple perspectives were a gift, which is kind of like I'm saying what lesson I learned. Multiple perspectives are valuable, and this is why, which is true. However, my final sentence is saying looking ahead. When I say looking ahead, I'm saying this is something that happened to me now, but it's not staying here in the now. It's going to move on into the future. When I go to college, I want this experience to be something that shapes my college experience as well. That's why I say looking ahead, and I use a forward-looking statement at the very end. Awesome. And yeah, okay, I think that's all I want to cover. So this essay has a bit of a different style than the last two essays. There's 4 in total, by the way, because there's 4 out of 8 that you respond to. The other 2 essays were more about a specific event that I did and talking about that event. But this essay, I want to show you guys that even if you don't have anything, you can write a good essay about it depending on the way you write it. So literally, I wrote this essay off of Like, there's not any cool event I did. There's not any cool thing I took part in. It was just something really simple, but I made it into some sort of story that turned into something more powerful than what that simple thing in isolation would look like. So let me show you what that looks like. The prompt said, every person has a creative side, and it can be expressed in many ways. Problem solving, original and innovative thinking, and artistically, to name a few. Describe how you express your creative side. What is creativity? Under the dim flicker of my bedside lamp, the textbooks are a jumble of formulas, dates, theorems. As I read, I find myself reciting the facts, pasting them into my mind only to soon be forgotten. Yet, as the night drapes over me, I feel a magnetic longing to free myself into the vast sphere of the unknown. Suddenly, I am submerged into a world of whys and hows, a world that urges the explorer within me to unleash the questions that race through my heart. Why does Gabriel's seemingly infinite horn have finite volume? How did chemists uncover the perfect molar ratio? Entranced by the processes that have led to the concepts nested in these textbook pages, I am overcome with the desire to reach past the seat of an onlooker and fill the seat of the inventor. So, I venture into the pathway of discovery. Studying ancient pyramids one night, a sudden thought sparked my creative side. I shall build the Giza complex. To reconstruct the process and truly bring my learning to life, I had to approach what I knew across multiple subjects through a different lens. Building something out of nothing requires finding use for even the most bizarre ideas. While contemplating a design, the formulas I had so thoroughly memorized were put to work. How do they apply to real life? Proportion suddenly electrified my imagination as I discovered the significance the golden ratio has in the pyramidal structure. Craving for more intellectual challenge, I experimented with different blueprints until I folded Florida's natural Tetra Pak into the perfect base to height ratio. 5. When I visited the pyramids in Egypt, they were no longer a textbook read, but a design I walked through with a blend of mathematical and creative thinking. With that personal immersion, the answers to my whys and hows became more clear. By asking questions and exploring what I learn, I'm able to transform my experimentation into a vessel for understanding. It all begins with the unknown. What is creativity? Alrighty. So here are some questions to ponder. What was the theme in this essay? What was the hook? And what important tip did I use, if anybody may have noticed? Go ahead and write your answers in the chat. Any ideas? There's no right or wrong answer. Anything that you thought was my theme, you thought was my focus? What do you think? Oops, sorry. Okay, so I just want to point something out really quick. So the theme of this essay is intellectual curiosity. It's about questioning what I'm learning and learning for a purpose. Not just learning to get a grade, but learning because I genuinely care and I'm so fascinated by what I'm learning and I constantly am questioning, and that's what drives me as a student. So something that I did to kind of portray this, to portray the fact that I'm an intellectually curious student, is I thought about, what do you do if you're interested in learning? What do you do if you're intellectually curious? You ask a lot of questions. You constantly ask questions about life. So I opened my essay with a question. Instead of taking creativity as something that's cut in stone, creativity can be art projects, it can be dance, it can be, these cliche things that you typically think of when you think of creativity. But creativity really can be anything. And the act of asking, what is creativity, in itself is a creative act, in itself is an intellectually curious act. So what I did is I opened with a question. That was my hook. And if you guys remember tip number 8, I said, end your essay with something that ties it back to your hook. So I ended my essay with that same exact question, what is creativity? As you can see, when you start something and then you end something, it brings this cohesive feel and makes it feel as if the essay is whole. It starts with a question and you go through this whole mind process of what you're thinking in your head, and then you end with that same question, showing that that seek for that question it's always unanswered. It's always a quest for you. It's always a journey, which is what you would expect out of someone who is intellectually curious. Beautiful. Okay. What was my theme? It was intellectual curiosity. My hook was a question, and which important tip did I use? Tie back to your hook. I have one more example that I'm going to show you guys, and for this last example, I want you to notice some of the parallels of this and the first essay I wrote. You might notice when you read this essay that there is a very common theme to the first story. If you remember, the theme of the first story was unity. However, I keep on emphasizing, pick a different key trait for every single essay you write. So even though there's a lot of unity that comes up in this essay, there is something different that I focus on. So I want to show you how a little slight change can make that focus different. Oh, sorry, the prompt is, what have you done to make your school or your community a better place? This is UC app question number 7, and in the Common app, I'm not sure if they have this exact question, but they have very similarly styled questions. We're all in this together. I sang excitedly as I envisioned the tight-knit community that characterized the high school musical experience. Yet, despite these childhood hopes, I dove into freshman year with a disappointing realization. My high school did not embody the culture of unity I fantasized of. Rather than being greeted with welcoming support, upperclassmen barricaded us with condescending sneers. This baffling division between the classes became especially prominent as our fall pep rally approached. As a time intended to come together and perform class dances, I eagerly anticipated this opportunity to feel connected to the school. So, when the news that freshmen were excluded from the class dance struck me, I decided to make a change. With an optimistic attitude, I approached the freshman class with my vision of school unity and arranged a meeting for us to build our ideas towards achieving this goal. After joining together a team of ambitious freshmen, I led our group effort in choreographing a dance that represented our hopes for an undivided future. I then spoke with faculty advisors to support this initiative. Okay, I can't see the bottom. And organize weekly practices, something. Hopefully you guys can read that. Upperclassmen's endeavor, taunting that we would get booed and have food thrown at us. Unfazed by this external doubt, I encouraged my team to remember our purpose. The courage we had in ourselves and the trust we built for each other overpowered all negativity. As weeks passed, we kept the energy alive among our team, which became evident on the day of our performance. Smiling wide as we connected hands to hit our final pose, I heard the uproar of applause. With a sense of fulfillment, I realized that the school had awakened to the harmony before its eyes. We had finally become accepted as one. I can now fully grasp the transformative influence we can create by stepping up for what we believe in. A focused vision allows us to surpass any obstacles that may stand in our path. With freshmen performing boldly every year since, our team inspired a movement that reached far beyond the dance floor. Awesome. Okay. Theme. What was the theme of this essay? So, you might, as I said, you might see there are many places in this essay where I use the word unity. And that might lead you to believe, maybe was she talking about unity again? But wait. That means she talked about it twice. And that's not so good because then you're not offering something new by yourself. So can anybody tell me, is there another theme that you noticed that maybe stood out a little bit more or maybe was supplemental to that? Good, awesome. Anishka wrote initiative. That's beautiful. So what I tried to do with this essay, even though it was very focused, like the whole point of this dance was that freshmen were excluded and they were bullied, and I wanted to bring the freshmen back into school, and I thought the biggest way to symbolize that was to get them back into the pep rallies. I'm sure, I think most of you have pep rallies, and it's like a really fun event, and I think it's a really school-spirited event, and if every class does a dance but the freshmen don't, it's like a sever in the school. But instead of focusing on specifically that unity and why that unity is important to me, I focused on taking initiative, being proactive. Over here, I say, I approach the freshman class with my vision. This is showing taking initiative. I decided to make a change. This is a key phrase for taking initiative. Additionally, when you take initiative, you're sometimes faced with challenges. Upperclassmen scoffed at our endeavor. We were taunted for it. We were booed for it. People told us we'd have food thrown at us. Did this faze us? Heck no. That's you overcoming small challenges in your road of taking initiative. So yeah, it is very much focused on unity, but the essay is not about that. It's about taking initiative and facing the challenges that come with that. And then what do I end with? I end with a reflection. I learned about the influence you can create by making those small steps in what you believe in. Beautiful. All right, challenge question. How could I have changed this essay to make the same topic fit a different prompt? Remember, some of the prompts included a prompt about leadership, a prompt about creativity, a prompt about what's your greatest skill. There's so many prompts. I'm sure you guys can have many ideas for this. Let's say I specifically focused on what I did as a leader and specifically focused on how I learned as a leader. Then I would answer the leadership prompt. Let's say I focused on what it took to make the dance, how the choreography came together, what it was like being a choreographer. Then I can focus on the creativity essay. What if I wrote about my greatest skill is being proactive? My greatest skill is taking initiative. Then I can answer that essay. So you see, literally, whatever topic you have, just write about it slightly differently, and you can make it fit any prompt. That's why choose your essays to fit your prompts and not your prompts to fit your, choose your prompts to fit your essays and not your essays to fit your prompts. Awesome. So that wraps it up for this presentation. And now I think Shaylee will open it up for a Q&A, and I will be here to answer any questions you guys may have.
Yes, thank you so much. The presentation was great. I know I myself learned so much more about college applications and the UCs and just everything in general. So if you guys have any questions, we opened the Q&A, so feel free to write some questions. Do you want to quickly stop sharing your screen, then we can start answering some of these? Great. Okay, perfect. Okay, so our first question is, how do I know if my experiences are unique, and how do I avoid being cliche when writing my essays?
That is a really good question. So here's the thing. If you overthink your experiences and you try to think, how do I make this unique? You're going to set yourself up for a loophole. You don't want to think about, is my experience unique? You just want to write about it with the passion as if it is the most unique thing in the world. Because it's not about your experiences being different from everyone else's. Like, the truth is, we're all high schoolers. We're all joining clubs. We're all doing things that are very similar to what everyone else is doing. So it's not specifically about what your experience is. It's about the passion that you use when you write about it, about the lessons that you learn. So when I say that, what I mean is, by sounding unique, what I mean is write about it in a way that makes you stand out and that shows your personality, rather than just writing about the event itself. And then the second part of the question, what was the second part?
That was saying, how do I avoid being cliche when writing my essays? And how do I know if my experiences are unique?
Got it. Yeah. So for the cliche thing, the main thing is just avoid cliche lessons. Like, if you just search up cliche lessons, like after every rainbow, there's a story. Wait, I don't know, things like that. Just avoid cliche lessons that you hear everywhere. Rephrase it in your own words so it really sounds authentic.
Awesome. And then our next question is, how much do you think your essays contributed to your admission at UCLA?
I think it's half-half. I actually think essays are slightly more important. Because, and I'll tell you, I have friends who had 1590 on the SAT, like perfect GPA scores, and they didn't get in because their essays were, they didn't spend that much time on it. They didn't write about it in the best way, even though they had these amazing scores. And I also have friends that had amazing essays, but they didn't have like the best scores, and they also didn't get in. However, I think it's much more common to hear about people having really great experiences and writing about it in a great way and not having the grades to fully support that and getting into great schools. So I think essays are slightly more important, and that's why I would really, really focus on them. Also focus on your studies. That is important too. But you don't need a perfect GPA to get into a good UC school. Berkeley, UCLA, anything. You don't need a perfect GPA. But if you have good experiences and you can write about it with the passion, then you're good.
Awesome. No, thank you. I hope that helps whoever asked that. I know sometimes the grades and everyone's worried about the GPA, but like you said, it's really important to also take time and focus on writing your essays and everything like that.
Yeah.
Okay. Our next question is, what can I do to find my creative side?
To find your what?
To find your creative side.
That's a great question. So I think this is, okay, well, two things I want to comment on. One is, I really want you guys to know that when you're in high school, you don't have to have your passion figured out. You don't have to have your life figured out. And I know in college apps, there's this, I throw around this word passion a lot, as if all of you guys know your passion. I know the majority of us probably have no idea. I still don't fully know what my passion is. But in high school, you have a really big exploration stage. You have so many clubs in high school. I think in high school, we had over 100 clubs. The main thing I would do, especially if you are like a freshman or a sophomore earlier in your stages, join whatever clubs sound interesting to you, go to a few of their meetings, see how you like it, and then stick to one or maybe like two. Just commit to one that you really like, and stick with that throughout your 3-4 years, however long you're there. Because if you stay in something and you show development in that thing over time, you start learning about some of your passions, and you start learning maybe you really don't like that, or maybe you really do. And then it becomes more about your character and not so much about you're just doing this college acts. So if you're in the exploration stage, take advantage of that. Join the different clubs and see which ones you like. College is another exploration stage. When you go to college, literally, like, you learn so much about yourself. I can't even tell you. I came into college as a math major, changed to a bio major. I learned so much about myself. I thought I wanted to be like a doctor, then I realized I wanted to be like a professor. It's just so much you learn. So you don't have to have everything figured out now.
Awesome. Thank you for that answer. Okay, the next question, I'm pretty sure it depends on like where you type it, but is there a specific font or font size that you have to use when writing?
So actually, what every college app person or admission thing will have you do is write it in a separate document just so you can edit it whenever. And then when you're ready to submit, you just copy and paste that into their submission portal, and they have an automatic font for you. So you don't have to worry about that. You just copy and paste and then submit.
Okay, perfect. And then, so I think it's a little bit personal, but they're asking, will like 1B hurt you in high school? And like, how much does your GPA matter?
No. I really want to stress this, you guys. You do not have to have perfect grades, and you do not have to have a perfect SAT score. I did not have a perfect SAT score, and I got into all the UCs I applied to, and it's not about having, you can have many Bs, honestly, but you can write a good essay and still stand out. However, don't let this make you not try. It's good to get A's, and it's good to try hard on your tests, but tests aren't everything. And I think college is kind of moving towards this persona where grades aren't everything, and that's why they really emphasize this holistic learning. So yeah, don't worry about it. If you got a B, you're fine.
Okay, awesome. And then does your talent need to relate to what major you want to get into? So I'm assuming they're saying like when you write about something in your essay, should it relate to what you plan to major in?
Yeah, that's a great question. So if you know what you want to major in, and you know that this is something you're passionate about, it's great to show that off in your essays. For example, I had a friend who really knew she was pre-med. She knew she wanted to be a doctor. She had known this for a long time, and her essays beautifully portray this. Like, you can just feel that passion in her essays. But for me, you can probably tell there wasn't really too much of a major anything in my essays because I didn't know what I wanted to do. I didn't really have that passion yet. So it's absolutely not necessary. If you have it, show it. If you don't, it's totally fine if your essays are all about different things.
Okay, great. And then another question, can you link websites or nonprofits or any businesses you started in as a reference in your essays, or do college admission officers not allow that?
That's a great question. I don't know. The thing is, like, you can link it if you want, but I don't know if once you convert it to the box that they have you input everything in, I don't know if you can hyperlink. It might take away the hyperlink, so you might not be able to click on it. So I would say, instead of linking like the actual website, if you have a website, just say, like, for example, Shaylee, she can say, I started Shape Your Future Organization, and you can find me on Shape Your, like, if you say Shape Your Future Organization, they'll probably be able to find your website, or you can just say, you can reference me at shapeyourfuture.com or something like that.
Okay, awesome. And then another question. Do you like majoring in biology at UCLA, and would you recommend it?
Oh my God, I love it so much. And I came in as a math major, and I thought that math was my thing. And then I took a bio class at UCLA. And granted, I hated AP bio in high school. It was not my thing at all. But I took a UCLA bio class, and they just taught it in such a different way. I thought it was much more application based and much more about, like, you really felt like you were learning from the eyes of a scientist and less about just memorizing some molecules, which I felt like AP bio was a lot of. And when I learned about it in that way, I just developed this really big passion. And honestly, guys, in college, like, you have so much opportunity to get close to your professors. Like, if you go to office hours, a school that has 350 kids in one class, 3 to 5 kids show up to office hours. So literally, if you make a consistent habit of going to office hours, you're going to learn so much about your professor, learn about what they do, learn about their life, and this helps you kind of gauge what you want to do as well. I became like best friends with my bio professor in my first quarter, and that really helped me like solidify that I wanted to be a bio major. I would just say it's all about the relationships, and then from there you'll see that any major you take, like when you have those relationships, I think you'll be able to enjoy.
Awesome, thank you. I know, like, even like I don't know what I want to do, but she was telling me earlier, like, you can explore so much more about yourself in college and really decide your major there if you're not sure, you don't have an idea of what you want to do.
Completely.
And okay, our next question is, how many colleges do you think we should apply to, and do you have to rewrite your essay for each college?
No, yeah, that's a great question. So for UC apps, I know not all of you are from California, but if you are from California, UC apps are all the same essays, the 8 prompts that I showed you in the beginning. You just pick 4, and then you just select whatever schools you want, UCLA, Berkeley, Irvine, whatever. You select it, and it'll be the same application for all of them. For Common App, it's the same thing. No matter what private you apply to, you're most likely going to have to do the Common App, which is very similar to the UC app, except you pick 1 question instead of 4. And then usually a private school will have supplemental questions as well. For example, if you apply to an Ivy League, almost every Ivy League will have a question that says, why Brown University or why Harvard or something like that. And then they'll ask you, for example, for Stanford, you have to write like a letter to your future roommate, like silly things like that, where it's just specific to that school. But every college, if it's a private university, will have a Common App as a standard thing, plus like some supplemental things, and UC apps have just the same exact essays.
Okay, and then a follow-up question they asked, I think you kind of answered this, but do all colleges besides UCs use the Common App, or do some have their own application system?
Do all colleges? So I don't know if it's exactly all, but I know the majority of private schools use Common Apps or the Coalition app. If you haven't heard about that, it's very similar to the Common App. You also just pick, I believe, 1 question to respond to. It's all generally the same questions. You can probably reuse a lot of your essays because it's generally the same. But most private universities will use a Common App, and UC schools or other public schools will have some sort of like public-based app.
Okay, cool. And then if you adapt your prompts to your essay, how do you choose which prompts to pick?
Okay, wait, I just want to make sure I understood correctly. So if you have an experience and you're trying to pick a prompt, you're asking how to know what prompt to pick for that experience?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. This is honestly, like, it depends on how you want to write about the experience. Because I think any prompt can fit your experience depending on how you write about it. If you choose an experience and maybe you haven't talked about something important to you, you haven't talked about like leadership yet, you haven't talked about negotiation, communication, I don't know. Those are just keywords, but you all have things that are important to you. If you haven't talked about that in one of your previous essays, then find a prompt that can fit into that keyword. And I've showed you some examples of how you can do this, but really it's all about just focusing on that keyword and then thinking about how you can write the essay in a way to fit that prompt, just slightly tweaking it. Okay,
perfect. And then I think they rephrased their question again. They're saying, so if you, okay, at least the way I'm interpreting this, so if you like you write your essay for, let's say, like the UC applications, and then you want to use that same essay for like on the Common App, how would you adapt your previous essay to fit a different prompt, and how would you pick a prompt from like the Common App, for example, to fit something else you had already written?
That's a great question. So something that's different about the Common App and the UC apps is that since the Common App, you just respond to 1 question and you have many more words to do so. I would recommend expanding on your UC app. Don't just take whatever story you wrote about in your UC app and just kind of try to transplant it into your Common App. Try to take that, and I would recommend starting from scratch, using that outline in mind and starting from scratch, because otherwise it'll come off as too cut and pasty. In your Common App, it is okay to include a few key experiences. You can dive deep into one story and then also add a few more key experiences just because you have more length and that's all the reader gets to see about you. So I wouldn't recommend just copying and pasting from UCs and editing a few things. I would recommend using a similar outline or a similar event that happened and then starting from scratch when you write it.
Okay, yeah, definitely. I hope that answers the question, and I interpreted right. Feel free to type it again if you have more questions about that. Okay, our next question is: since all the UCs use the since all the UCs use the same application, are you more likely to get into all of them that you apply, or to none of them that you apply to?
Every UC school uses the same application, but they are all completely different. Like they're all judging you completely separate of each other. For example, UCLA does not know if UC Berkeley accepted you or not, and that is not impacting their decision. So there's no correlation between the UC schools when they're accepting you. Everyone is independent of its own. So there's no there's no correlation. It's not like you'll get into none or you'll get into all. It's just each one judges for itself.
Okay, perfect. And then, well, I know we didn't kind of cover extracurricular, so I don't know if you want to take this question still. But for extracurriculars, they're asking like, should they write the similar? So sorry. Okay, so should you write the same extracurriculars that you mentioned in your essays in like an extracurricular section as well, like in the college application, or should you try to list different extracurriculars for that part?
It just depends on how many you have, because specifically for the UC application, they give you 5 different categories and 5 subslots for every category. So that's literally like 25 extra things you can list. And that's like a lot to be involved in. So if you don't have enough things to fill all that out, then you can totally just input the stuff you wrote about in your essays. But if you're involved in a lot of things, then I would definitely recommend not repeating yourself.
Okay, awesome. And then this is the last question I see, but if you guys have any more questions, feel free to put them in the chat. What is like your biggest advice when writing essay, or the biggest thing that students should keep in mind?
That's a great question. I think, so I've read a lot of students' essays and I've seen a lot of different writing styles, and I think every essay is like so unique. You definitely see a lot from the student from their essay. But the main thing that I would say about your essay, okay, 2 main things. One, tell a story. Telling a story is probably the most powerful way you can write your essay. Even if you're writing about a few key experiences, you kind of want to ingrain a story into those key experiences, because the purpose of your essays is that the college reader doesn't want you to just be a number. They want you to be a person. And how do you connect to that person side of you is by telling stories. That's just human nature to tell stories like that. So if you can make your essay into a story, you're on great track. The second thing, just because I see this so much in essays, keep your essay positive. Really, if you're experiencing a challenge, if you had a leadership event and it went bad, if you had an event and it didn't go well, that's great to address because you grow from that. But if the majority of your essay is about how it failed and what happened to make it fail, that's not good. You want that to be limited to 1 paragraph at most, and then everything else is about, okay, how was your next event better? What did you learn from it to make it better? So keep it positive and tell a story is what I would say. Also start early.
Awesome. Sorry, I think I missed some of the questions in the Q&A. Sorry, guys. Quickly ask those right now. I think you kind of already went over this, but like, what are the cliche topics that you should avoid writing about?
Okay, I don't know if I can say like what some cliche topics are, because that I don't want to, you shouldn't limit yourself in that way. Like if you have some sort of story that you want to share and you're scared of sharing it because a lot of other people have that story too, don't think about it like that. You have your own voice and you have your own experience. And if you make it personal to who you are, there is no such thing as a cliche experience. What I meant when I said cliche is cliche lessons, like cliche phrases, cliche, like, you know, I don't know, just cliche things that you see online. If you paraphrase those in your essays, like kind of like the same thing, then it's not coming off as your voice. So every lesson, every reflection you write about, really take the time to look internally and say it in your own words. So it shows that it actually came from you and not just something you searched online.
Okay, great. Thank you. And then our next question is, do you recommend getting a college counselor to review essays? How helpful are they in reading your essays and editing them?
It depends, because, so here's the thing. You have so many resources available to you. Honestly, you can ask any teacher, and I'm sure they'll be more than willing to look at your essays. I think I asked like 10 different of my high school teachers, and all of them did it for free, right? Like for a college counselor, you usually have to pay. You can ask your counselors in high school, and they're like part of their job is to review over college apps. So they will look over your essays for free as part of what they do for your high school, whatever, your high school. Another great thing, your friends. Your friends are all going through the college application process, and they are so helpful. And try not to get in that mentality of like, oh, I don't want to show my essays to anybody, they will copy, things like that. I think for the most part, people aren't out to get you, and people aren't out to steal your words. If you share your essays with your friends and have them look over it, have them edit some grammar things, have them tell you if it sounds like you, that's a great way to improve your essays. Your parents too, great resource. Your parents are, they know you probably better than anybody else. So if they read your essays and they say, yeah, that does sound like you, then you're on good track. So I think it's not necessary to get a college counselor or like any sort of paid service, but it just depends. Like if you really feel the need to, then it definitely is beneficial. Just because usually people who offer those services have a lot of experience and have been doing that for some time, but you have a lot of resources without that, so you don't need it.
Okay, and I think this is the last question that I see, but someone can correct me in the chat if I'm wrong. Okay, so the last question is, would it be okay for me to use my response for different universities as well?
To use what?
To use my responses for different universities as well. I think we kind of went over this a little bit, but.
Oh, sorry. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you now. The question was, would it be okay for me to use my response?
So this just depends. Like you can definitely reuse your essays, but I would highly recommend if you have a different prompt, try to not just copy and paste your essay. Try to just use your essay as reference and then write it from scratch, just because copy and paste comes off, like you can tell. If you use a UC prompt and write about it for a Common App prompt, they are slightly different in the way the prompt is styled. So it'll be able to tell that you kind of like copied and pasted, but you can definitely use that same idea, use that same outline, use that same draft. So I would have your UC essay next to you while you're writing your Common App and go through kind of the same thought process, just write about it to fit the Common App more. But to save time, like I also applied to a school in Canada, University of British Columbia, and I definitely like pretty much reused all my UC essays, but instead of like trying to edit them, I just wrote them again, but it was so much easier because I already had my point of reference.
Okay, awesome. I think that's about all the questions. Thank you so much for your time today. This workshop was so informative and your advice and tips were so helpful. And viewers, once again, thank you for watching. Don't forget to join us for day 2 tomorrow of this series. We're going to be talking with David Hossley, co-founder of College Confidential and a college admissions officer, and he'll be sharing his advice on college admissions and applications. So if you haven't registered yet, you can do so with the link from our website. We look forward to seeing you all tomorrow. And once again, thank you so much, everyone in Nearest, for joining us today.
Yeah, thank you all for being here. It's great having you.